Hello, Mick, how are you?
Right.
Sit down there if you would. Now, Mick, first of all, do you go to Bertie's tent at the Galway races?
Oh, all the time.
Have you ever been?
No, I've never made it that far, no.
You never made it that far. That wouldn't be your kind of place.
Well, I suppose I probably wouldn't get in anyway.
They wouldn't let you in. You're kind of critical of your own class, the builder and developer class.
Well, to call them my class might be a little inaccurate, but anyway, yeah, I suppose I've done very well out of the construction industry. I suppose I've probably benefited from a very favourable tax regime brought in by the present government, but that shouldn't really prevent me from being critical if I feel that there's something to criticise.
You think a lot of the stuff that's been built is pretty poor?
Well, that's just one of the problems. There's a lot of problems. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of poor work done over the last 15 years. And there's been a lot of very good work done too. So some builders doing fantastic work. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that have been allowed go that shouldn't have been allowed go. They're taking a little bit more of an interest now. But it was unfortunate that...
When you say things allowed go, things that were allowed to be built, styles of accommodation that were created that were just not up to the job.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first of the apartment complexes, I suppose, began around 1990. And we were probably relieved that anybody was prepared to build in the rundown city centre areas at the time. And it was a great idea to actually introduce tax incentives to get people to build in areas that they weren't interested in building in prior to that. But unfortunately, there wasn't much of an eye kept to the quality of what they were building. Apartments were too small, they were a bit claustrophobic, they lacked good facilities, very little for kids, poor space, poor light, rooms too small.
No place to put a suitcase.
No, and just the general quality as well left a lot to be desired. A huge problem was the fact that for most of all that time, the leading party in the country, Fianna Fáil, have been in power, and unfortunately they've had an unhealthy, too close a relationship, in my opinion, with the developer come builder.
When you say unhealthy and too close,
well, I mean,
do you mean that the party would tend to do the builders and developers bidding in exchange for contributions? And I don't mean the brown envelope, I mean just the upfront political donation.
Well, it would be true to say that in most of the world today, political parties they have the backing of big business. It's very hard to have a large party and not be involved with big business. That's just the way the thing is planned out.
But a lot of people, I mean, you may be exceptional, but a lot of people say, look, the rules are the rules. We got planning permission. This is what the council, wherever it is, whether it's in Cork or Dublin or Galway, this is what they allowed us to build. So we built it. It's not our fault. We didn't make the rules.
Right, OK. Well, that's why I would lay a lot more responsibility on the door of the government. The legislation wasn't tight enough. There was a lot of things. The government, they knew that things could have been better, but they weren't really going to upset their friends, and that was disappointing. Likewise, I mean, if you just look at, if you move house tomorrow, you're going to pay 9% stamp duty, but close on half the property deals that have taken place in this country over the last 10 years, they've managed to avoid a lot of stamp duty. For example, in the license and trust agreement, where if Joe Murphy sells 20 acres of land for housing to Joe Bloggs, he doesn't actually take full ownership of it. He leaves the title with Joe Bloggs. Joe Murphy gets a license from Bloggs to build the houses. When they're ready to be sold, he sells them on through the original owner's name, and he doesn't pay stamp duty, but the people that are buying him pay it. They avoid stamp duty, right? So there's been a huge, despite the fact that the government have taken in an awful lot of money with stamp duty right through the building boom, they've also missed out on a lot of money. And they were asked in 2000 what they were going to do about the license and trust agreement in order to stop the avoidance of the stamp duty. Now, the guys that were availing of it weren't breaking the law. They were availing of a loophole in the system.
But do you think that loophole was deliberately left there by government to look after their friends?
If they say in 2000 that they're looking into the matter, and they're saying in 2007 that they're looking into the matter,
you can draw your own conclusion.
It's a bit like a hole in the road, but it doesn't really disappear if you keep looking into it, you know.
You actually, you've strong views, Mick. You've strong views on a lot of things. And in fact, you used your own building you were working on, to make some political points. And I just want to show our viewers some of the things that you did. No to war, no to Nice, no to American terrorism in front of a building, using the whole facade of the building to give a political message. Why did you do that?
Well, I felt obliged to do it, to be honest. I felt very angry that our government were prepared to facilitate the Americans to refuel in Shannon while they went on their way to drop bombs from a very high height over the cities of Iraq. And it was pretty obvious to people that they weren't actually going in there for the health of the Iraqi people. 600,000 of them had died since then, and before that, even after the 91 war, the war that only took about 6 months, there was 900,000 children died from the after effects of the war and the lack of medicines due to the sanctions imposed by the Western powers.
We have the blood of Iraqi children on our hands, another big sign that you put up in front of a building. What did the City Council say to you about these?
Well, they took that one down after a few days. I managed to keep the first one up for about 3.5 weeks because I went to the High Court and I got an injunction to prevent them from touching it. And the only reason I was able to get away with it at that time was because there was an election on, and there was a little amnesty for banners or posters in the 3 weeks prior to an election.
Oh, really? So that's how you kept it up.
Yeah.
You have, in addition to trying to build right and do, you know, if you're building housing, it's got to be right for people, it's got to be livable housing. But besides that, you've got two passions. One is Italy and one is football. Now, why Italy? Where did that come from?
Well, I suppose it started around 1990 when Ireland qualified for the World Cup in Italy. And,
so it's linked to football.
It was, yeah. It started with football, but I had two sisters living there as well. But after going over in 1990, I was very fond of the place, and I went back a lot, and eventually bought an apartment in Turin, so I went over a bit more, and started to take a strong interest in everything Italian. Piemonte is a region just south of Turin, and is probably the finest wine-growing region in Italy. So I got involved in the wine then as well, and into the food. Incredible place for food. So I suppose when I got the opportunity and I started doing a bit of development in the city, I decided to actually start keeping the commercial on the ground floor and bring a bit of Italy and a bit of quality.
And that's what you've done. You've created a little Italy along the banks of the Liffey, really.
Yeah, it's they're just at the Millennium Bridge. But the only way I can, if I had just sold it off, I would have had no control over the quality of what went on in the units in the street. Excuse me. By running them ourselves, importing the wine from small producers in Italy, importing the food likewise from small producers, we were able to make the whole area a little bit more interesting for the people that were buying the apartments. So I mean, it was good business too.
Yeah, but it's about quality of life. I mean, you say that you want, in your winery, you have a wine bar in Inchicore, for example, that you want the ordinary man on the minimum wage to be able to enjoy a glass of reasonable Italian wine and a latte if they want to. Yeah,
well, we sell wine for €4 a glass. Most of the wine bars in town will be charging 6+, and the wine is very good. All the wine is coming from small producers with an honest approach to the production of wine, people who love their work.
We've been talking earlier, though, about the way Irish people are living. And I know you're a fan of the way the Italians choose to live. There's no, like, 40-year mortgage around their necks. They choose a different way.
Yeah, but the Italian economy has huge problems at the moment. There's a big shortage of money, and they wouldn't have near as much money in their pocket as the Irish would. But they have different things, and the quality of life is probably better despite the fact that they're not near as cash rich. Yeah, I mean, the lack of a mortgage is a big benefit to them.
They rent?
They rent. 85% of Italians rent, whereas about 75% of the Irish aim towards home ownership. They don't really have the obsession with owning their home, so they don't have the mortgage, and rent is actually lower than it is here as well. Now, the fact that we're so mad to have our own home here is one of the things that's driving the economy as well, though, and there's been spin-offs as well for us, right? But having said that, it's getting more difficult all the time for people to get on the property ladder, and I honestly believe that in 20 years' time there'll be less people in Ireland owning their houses because they won't be able to afford them.
Yeah. But they might be enjoying life a bit more. Maybe
so, but there's a whole different ethos in Italy anyway, and there's no doubt that a worrying trend here is I feel that Irish society has moved much closer to American than it has to the European. And as Mary Harney was fond of saying, she'd rather look to Boston than Berlin. I'm not so sure from a cultural point of view that's just a good idea.
You'd prefer Naples to New York anytime?
I'm afraid so, yeah.
Finally, I should ask you about football. You're a mad supporter of football and your own beloved Wexford.
Well, I'm not mad. Obviously, I'm very interested in football, but I enjoy the game very much. And, but I suppose my involvement with the Wexford Youths has been much more about the people and the young people of the area rather than the game itself. It's much more of a social thing. People are always going to be more important than the game itself. And I think, generally speaking today, young people are very insecure. There's more problems than ever. Suicide rates have never been as high. I think it's more difficult for people to feel good about themselves, and I think that by the voluntary work that people do in sport can help in a small way towards giving them a better feel-good factor about themselves. And there's, generally speaking, sport has been a big benefit. All sports have been a big benefit to people in this country. We're a country where the government have been very poor and slow at giving proper facilities. That's why so much of the social life still revolves around the pub. We're way behind Europe in terms of social facilities. It goes back to the construction thing even. The whole notion that our government might give planning permission for 200 houses in a place and not one playing pitch beside it is outrageous, and it's not as if the builder or developer couldn't afford it. All the government has to do is put it in the plan, make it a part of the planning conditions. But obviously they haven't had a mind to do it.
Do you have any message for your fellow developers before you go, Mick?
No, I mean, I've been much more inclined to address the government, and it is very unfortunate. I see our government working hand in hand with the better off in our society rather than working to protect the weak in society, which I think is the basis of what good government is about. Even when you got, say, a JCB burnt out by fellas, you got obviously angry about it, but you understood why it happened. Yeah, I mean, 20% of the city is threatened with poverty, and at all times. I think that's an unacceptable figure. The country's been awash with money, and now we have them all prepared to buy the middle class vote for the election. We've Labour even bringing down the standard tax band from 20 to 18. Why aren't they looking? I mean, it's very difficult to have these real low tax bands and have a real good welfare system and look after the less well-off in society as well. The countries, if you look at Europe, the countries that have tackled poverty best have been the Scandinavians, and they are the countries where the tax bands are the highest. It's very hard to expect to have good quality European social system and expect to be able to do it with US tax regime. Mick Wallace, thank you very much for being with us tonight.